Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone's doing all right. Is having a good week so far. I know it's been a long time no see. I don't post on this channel as often as I used to. Um, but I wanted to come on here because I did have a few things to get off my chest and just share some life updates. I've been meaning to do this for the past few months now, but life has kind of gotten in the way, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So if you want to hear a little bit more about what's been going on in my life, please stay tuned. I know I usually have my face on camera for most of these videos, but I really wanted to more freely express myself and not be as self-conscious about, being on camera while I discuss these topics. So don't mind me. Hopefully the next video, I will show my face and be able to do that just as a kind of a continuity, because the topic I'm going to discuss, um, I think I did show my face on a couple of those videos, so I'll show my face in the next one. Just bear with me. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the change in my marital status. Coincidentally, at the time that I'm recording this, I actually just went to the DMV to get my driver's license name changed back to my maiden name because I decided that is what I wanted to do. But yes, I recently did get a divorce. If you have followed my channel and my Jehovah's Witness saga, you will hear me talk about my now ex-husband and how we met, how we got together, and how he was the catalyst to me waking up from the Jehovah's Witness religion with, his reasoning. Again, he's very familiar with the scriptures and things like that. And while he didn't directly flip the switch, it took a couple of other events, and I talk about that all throughout my playlist. If you're interested, again, in reviewing my Jehovah's Witness saga, I will include that playlist in the description box. But I really talk about how he kind of reasoned with me and helped me to wake up from the religion. Um, so unfortunately, our marriage did not work out. We the divorce was kind of finalized a couple of months ago. We have three amazing, beautiful children together. And so this is a new chapter. Um, no one really gets married and plans on getting divorced. So, this has probably been a pretty difficult journey, probably for both of us. I won't get into the details in this, but I'm finding that, I'm having to navigate life as, officially a single mother of three kids. So it's been an interesting experience. Um, I really think back on before getting married, how I navigated things such as interactions with the opposite gender, um, just being single and things like that. And it's so crazy now that I'm 40, about to turn 41 next month, how my mindset has changed in a lot of those things. And just having to learn to navigate and find my footing as, again, an officially single woman again. Um, I know it's going to be a challenge. I am still trying to figure myself out even years after leaving the Jehovah's Witness religion. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been very interesting. I will say that, when it comes to life, whether you're leaving the Jehovah's Witness religion or not, life always has its hills and its valleys. So I've been just kind of learning that myself. Um, like I said, it hasn't been easy. I have my days where, I'm up, and my days that I am, you know, not so up. Um, but I do take pride in myself. When I filed without an attorney, and I handled all the paperwork by myself. So I take pride in that. If you guys follow me on social media, I talk about my journey of relocating me and my kids, um, you know, to be closer to family. because, as you know, it takes a village. So, I take pride in those things because I could not imagine um, 20 years ago, as maybe a 21-year-old woman without kids, I couldn't imagine, myself saying, hey, at this age, you're going to be responsible for three little people. You're going to have to handle a lot on your own, and you're going to be fine. And so that's what I've been learning. I've been learning about my inner strength and, how to navigate things and really how to rely on myself and rely on my own strength. And in a sense, rely on my faith because I still have that. I still believe in God and the Bible. So that's been really helpful. And I will talk about that a little bit later in the video. But it's just amazing how life happens and how you really have to change your mindset in order to get through certain things. And when I reflect on it, I've made a lot of observations especially when it comes to people who have left the Jehovah's Witness religion. I realized that things like divorce and breakups in relationships and things like that are not uncommon. A lot of times when you are leaving a high control cult, um, your mindset changes. You change. You become more. You become more of your own person, and so a lot of times when that happens, that does have an impact on the people around you, and sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes there's a trade-off. So I think I realize when I see a lot of people and couples, um, I used to sometimes low-key envy couples who would leave the Jehovah's Witness religion together. They were both Jehovah's Witnesses and they left. But you just never know. People change. Um, People grow. And so sometimes that does impact your relationships and you have to learn how to work around it. It just is what it is. So other than that, I won't get into too many details. But I am looking forward to this new chapter in my life, learning how to navigate interactions, things like friendships, and just new experiences. As a divorced single mother. The second topic I wanted to talk about, is a kind of a vulnerable piece of my life and my children's life as well. And I've been needing to talk about it for a couple of years, but um, I wanted to kind of talk things over with the family I'm still in contact with and things like that. But now that I've done that, I want to talk about this piece. And so it's something that I've been kind of working with since my oldest daughter was born. Um, and that is, when she was pretty young, um, and she started to get into the school system, um, she had a couple of struggles with communication, um, sensory sensitivities, and things like that. And so when they evaluated her, they found, or they determined that she seemed like she might have autism. Now, keep in mind, this was an educational diagnosis, not a clinical one. But I started picking up some things from about the age of 18 months where I noticed some things. Having worked as a teacher since I was in my early 20s, I worked with a lot of students on the autism spectrum, students with multiple disabilities. So I picked up some things. I also have family that are on the spectrum. Um, and in talking and having conversations with my family, there's more on the spectrum than I realized. So it was just something that I noticed. Um, but a lot of times with autism, there's a low level of information, specifically on, kind of how autism occurs. So there's so many different theories. Some people look at different things. Um, and, I kind of took those things into consideration. Um, and then, when my oldest daughter was about 5 years old, I ended up having my son. And then uh, not too long after that, I became pregnant with my youngest daughter. Everything kind of happened in succession. Well, by the time my youngest daughter was born, my son started showing similar, um, traits and things like that, where he was struggling with communication, and of course, some sensory things going on. And then when my youngest daughter was born, um, at an even younger age, we started noticing some things. And so we really had to kind of dig a little deeper, and, you know, go and get some evaluations done. Um, and let me tell you something, honestly, getting an autism evaluation for 3 children is not an easy feat, in this country. It is not something now in pedi in when those children get checkups and things like that. They do, have a little screening that the parents fill out. But getting a clinical evaluation for autism is actually a struggle. And depending on which state you live on or live in, it can be an even bigger struggle. So it was very hard to get a formal evaluation and to find a place to clinically get my kids evaluated. Um, but after a few years, we were finally able to do it. And so they got their formal evaluation last year. So earlier last year, they got their formal clinical evaluation that all 3 of my kids were on the autism spectrum. Um, so, my daughter was about 10, son was about 4, and my uh, youngest was about 3 at the time. And so that was last year. And so that is really good because whenever they're enrolled in school, they have that clinical diagnosis, um, that they can have. Because a lot of times, if you don't have that, a lot of schools will honestly misdiagnose your kid or assume that they have some type of cognitive or developmental issue when it's really autism. One thing I'm learning about um, autism is that um, it impacts mainly your communication and sometimes sensory and especially social skills. It's not always a reflection on the cognitive or the um, intelligence of a kid. And so that's what it's really teaching me. A lot of times, you know, there's a stigma behind autism. And, there's occasionally where I had moments where I felt not shame, but, I felt self conscious about maybe how other people took my children. And I really had to get past that because my children are very bright, brilliant, talented, amazing kids. They just have something that's obviously caused by genetics that impacts their social abilities and their communication, and sometimes, some sensory issues. But they are very intelligent, very talented, and, and so it was just interesting to see how the um, medical piece impacted, or the clinical diagnosis really impacts the services and the help they get, not just from school, but from the community and things like that. So throughout this whole situation, especially after my youngest was born and I saw, some of these signs of autism in her, it really just made me think about not just um, my upbringing as Jehovah's Witness, but some of the things I struggled with when it came to social issues, my social awkwardness, a lot of my anxiety when I'm around people, even people that I know. And really, honestly, my struggles to make friends outside of Jehovah's Witness religion, to keep it real, outside of a few online friends that I have. I don't really have a set of friends. And I would talk about my struggles with friendship on this channel, and talk about maybe some ways to make new friends. But I just struggled, to find people locally that I could get together with, vibe with, and it was just a constant struggle for me, and I did not understand why. Um, and then I also noticed in myself, I started thinking about some of the sensory things. I won't get into too many details with that, but some things that where I was extra sensitive, and I just thought it was a weird quirk. But I had to really think and reflect. Um, and so after um, my kids were clinically evaluated, I actually determined for my 40th birthday, I was going to try to get evaluated. And one thing about autism evaluations for adults, um, they are very difficult to come by. A lot of places will evaluate children, but they will not evaluate adults. And the ones that do evaluate adults, you have to have, not all insurances cover it. And it's very expensive, very tedious process. So fortunately, I was able to find a facility that not only, evaluated adults, but also um, got, was able to use my insurance to cover the cost of it. So I was eternally grateful for that. And so I got evaluated, and turns out I was also on the spectrum. So it explained a lot when I think about my Jehovah's Witness upbringing and some of my experiences outside of the religion, even my choice in friendships and relationships, I feel like are framed around the fact that, I was on a spectrum I didn't even realize I was on. And so it just provided me with a lot of clarity, a lot of realization. Now, to the credit of Jehovah's Witnesses, the first time that I heard about autism was in the Jehovah's Witness Awake magazine. I had never heard that term before until like I was probably about uh, 10 years old when I discovered, I saw a little brief article about autism. Of course, there was very little information, there was a limited viewpoint on it, but they were the first ones that talked about it. Um, but when it comes to, you know, kind of addressing those things, honestly, while Jehovah's Witnesses talk about autism, going to do things like getting clinical evaluations and going to therapy and things like that, unfortunately, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that because it's kind of discouraged in the religion. So I was grateful to be able to have that experience of being evaluated, um, and, having follow up therapy because of it. And I think it's a huge part of my journey outside of the Jehovah's Witness faith. So I feel like that part of the chapter in my life, I feel like that has played a huge part in some of my experiences, both my good experiences and my bad experiences. So I'm trying to process off of that. Um, I've been to therapy for a lot of things. And so I'm just trying to continue to work on that. And that's one thing, um, again, that Jehovah's Witnesses discourage. But if you are going through anything, and if you're able to find a way to, please try to make sure you get therapy. A lot of times, people who leave the Jehovah's Witness religion, um, they may find different ways to heal, but one of the main ways that you are able to heal is by going to therapy, by talking to a professional, because there are a lot of struggles that you may have that talking to a professional might help you to process, even if that professional is not trained to address, religious trauma or handle cults. Being able to talk to a professional is a game changer. So I encourage anybody who's left the religion, no matter what your experiences are, if you're dealing with some type of trauma because of that, please try to seek therapy. The last topic or update I want to talk about is just where I am in the journey of my beliefs and things like that. Um, right now after all of the changes that have happened in the past couple of years in my personal life. So I talked about my journey through my faith in my Ex-JW saga. Again, if you want to check that whole playlist out, I'll put that in the description box. But I talk about when I first left the faith, I kind of embraced Christianity a little bit more. I felt like Jehovah's Witnesses, even though they claim to be Christian, they weren't doing Christianity correctly. So I was always, and I always look forward to reading the Bible, understanding, being able to read it on my own and understand it, attending different types of church services, and being able to learn from other people, and other churches and sermons and things like that, and um, just learning from other people. And then over the years, especially in my marriage, again, that continued to evolve to where I still believed in God and the Bible. Um, but, it had kind of evolved a little bit away from Christianity. One thing about life is that a lot of time your belief systems reflect what you're going through or the situation that you're currently in that moment. So, in all honesty, um, when I got married, I feel like a lot of my beliefs and how I felt about God and my faith reflected what my husband, or now ex-husband, believed and what he thought. And I think in a lot of marriages, um, sometimes that's the case. But there's also a lot of cases where, you have two people that have two different belief systems. You may have a person that, is Christian and another person that might be agnostic, or one that's, you know, Muslim and another one that's Buddhist. You know, I'm sure it's very possible for two people to have different belief systems um, and live peacefully together. It's very possible. I know it's not easy, but it's something that could be a thing. But I feel like in a lot of ways, um, especially women, they tend to reflect what their husbands believe. And I believe that was definitely the case while I was married. So, as my now ex husband's faith in God and the Bible evolved, a lot of what I believe, because I guess I was trying to find an identity in my faith, a lot of that was reflected, a lot of what he believed was reflected in what I believed. And so I feel like that measured my beliefs. I feel like my content, the limited content that I did post during the times that my beliefs were changing, kind of reflected that. And I'm honestly here to say that those are not necessarily my beliefs right now. But, how I felt about the Bible and things like that um, was kind of how I felt based on, my marital status. And I feel like towards the end of my marriage, that kind of began to change. And so I think that was maybe not a small, but I believe that was a factor in why the marriage eventually ended. Um, and as far as my current beliefs, that's still kind of in limbo. I still believe in God and the Bible. I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards Christianity and things like that. I have started going to different churches. We just moved to the new area, so I'm really trying to find a church that fits um, both me and my kids, especially my kids who do struggle with the sensory issues related to their autism. All of them have their own different sensory issues. So I have to take that into consideration when I'm looking for a church for them or for us to kind of attend on a regular basis. Since we just moved, we're still looking at that and taking that into consideration. Um, but the other thing that's evolved is not just going to church necessarily for faith. I feel like um, I am starting to become stronger in my understanding of the Bible, and I'm starting to have more of a discernment in what I'm reading and what I'm applying. Um, and I didn't have as much confidence while I was still married. I have a lot more confidence in what I believe. So if I see something and I see somebody applying the scripture a certain way, I could think in my head, okay, how you're applying that makes sense. Or I could think, hey, you're kind of using that to manipulate other people. There are a lot of people out there who use the Bible to manipulate. And that is something that's very common. Of course, we know it's very common in the Jehovah's Witness faith, but a lot of people use the Bible to manipulate and to mold and sometimes to boss and bully people around. And so I'm starting to become stronger in understanding when that's happening, and in my mind be like, okay, well, they're applying this scripture here. Well, this scripture says something else that's, you know, conflicting with what you're trying to say. Or, you're saying this, but this Bible principle, you're totally going against that. And that's even worse than the point that you're trying to make. So I feel like my understanding of the Bible is getting stronger and stronger when it comes to that. So I'm becoming more assertive in what I believe. So I am less reliant on a church or a religious institution to teach me what I know about the Bible, because I've been studying it since I've been a child, whether it was through the Jehovah's Witness religion or not. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of things. Well, that's one thing I'm grateful about in the Jehovah's Witness religion is that we were constantly studying the Bible, even though maybe the interpretations were off. The actual content and the actual stories and accounts, because I was raised in the religion for pretty much most of my childhood and a lot of my adult life, I'm very familiar with those things. So now I can apply them in an even mature manner based on my mature understanding. So my focus now, when it comes to finding a church and a church family, is a little more of a social piece. Again, I struggle with making friends. I have that social awkwardness. Um, so I am kind of more interested in finding a place where I can meet a community of people, not necessarily have to lean on those people, but I can meet people in a, faith-based sense, where maybe we could develop some friendships. My kids can develop some association and friendships there. So I'm kind of looking more of that. So even if a certain church that we attend has the teachings are good and things like that, if I don't feel like that community presence is there, I'm probably going to end up looking elsewhere. So I feel like my expectations of a church or a religion is evolving, um, because my confidence in my faith and understanding of the Bible is evolving. So these three topics are pretty much the major updates in my life. There's a lot of other different pieces, such as, again, I'm still trying to get over my social anxiety and awkwardness, and I want to make more real time friends, especially moving to this new area. I'm kind of hoping to form some, even if it's not close friendships, but meet people, and get to know people, and again form some type of social circle, not just online. I have a decent online social circle. I want to kind of have more of a local circle of things, of people I can, you know, maybe do things with, do social events with, and I want my kids to have the same thing too. Um, but yeah, those are pretty much the updates going on in my life. Again, I am thinking about doing a follow up video I've been meaning to do for a while now, and so I hope to do that soon. But thank you for listening to my life updates. Um, if you want in the comments, let me know how you guys are doing and how life's been treating you, especially, your time outside of the Jehovah's Witness organization, maybe with some life changes that you're going through. So if you're going through some of the things that I've discussed in my video, if you want to share that, um, again, please continue to check out my other videos on this channel. Please continue to check out the other channels in the description box. I'll continue to include those of other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who talk about their experiences. But other than that, I hope everyone's having a great summer so far and a good week. And that y'all continue to have a good day and continue to heal from leaving the Jehovah's Witness organization. Much love.